I'm so glad you could come back. My name is Kimmy Cummings, and I'm going to be dragging you through this bar prep. We're going to start off first with property. And for these videos, I am going to be the evil mistress of property for you. So first, we're going to talk about ownership of real property. Because in order for that property to be used, you have to own it. So who are the important people when it comes to ownership of property? Well, we have our grantor, who is the owner, current owner, or the seller, donor. Now, and then we have the grantee, who's the buyer or the recipient of that property. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to help you with some mnemonics. And if you don't know what a mnemonic is, well, you might have bigger problems. Now, let's go on and have us a little discussion about, well, what happens to me and Wilma? Well, we want to buy a property together. Or, what if I want to give, like, half my property to Wilma? Well, we'll become co-tenants, or a concurrent estate. And that happens when two or more, nothing wrong with a little throuple, persons own real property simultaneously. So, you know what? I got these 40 acres out in Arkansas. They're gorgeous. But there's no way I can handle all of... Oh, well, maybe I can. Maybe I can't handle all that. Anyway, back to property. Property, yes. Now, if I wanted to give 20 acres of that 40 concurrently to Wilma, but I didn't want to split the land, we could become concurrent tenants, or co-tenancy. Now, the important thing to remember for co-tenancy, there is no duty to improve property, and you cannot force co-tenants to contribute to the cost of improvements made by you. So, that means just because you want to improve the land and you thought, well, maybe I can kind of defer my cost if I let so-and-so own it with me, you can't force them. It's tempting, but you can't force them. Now, we're going to talk about all the various types of tenancies in common. And, well, first of all, we have the first one, which is tenancy in common, which is when you're just co-tenants. So the two of you both own the property, but it's nothing special. There's no rights of survivorship, none of that. So, with a tenancy in common, your co-tenant does not get your section of the property just because you die. It stays with their property, which that's an entirely different section. That's trusts and estates and wills, and if you let me keep dragging you, I'll eventually drag you through that too. Don't worry. I'll make sure you get some nice buttermilk biscuits while you're there, because you should always have some good food before you die. And God knows you can't get that up north. Not what they're cooking. So, the next co-tenant option is a joint tenancy. And let me tell you, that can be the pit. Who doesn't love a good pit? Barbecue pits, torture pit. Pits are the best. And it rhymes with tits. Pits, tits. Who doesn't love that? Okay, back to what I was saying. Joint tenancy can be created in the pit. Again, pits are great. So, to create a joint tenancy, you gotta have possession. It has to be equal in your interest. So, you can't create joint tenancy if Wilma only owns 25% of the property and you own 75%. It has to be equal. Because you're owning it in joint. Not joint, in joint. Meaning your scales gotta be balanced. Your tits gotta weigh the same. So, this also has to occur at the same time. So you can't say, oh, well, after this happened, she'll get 25%. No, you both gotta own 50% at the same time. That's important. Say with me, important. And you both have to be on the title. It ain't like a car where, oh, you don't need me on the title. No, I'll let you drive it. Sure. No. You have to be on the title. Now, we're going to go through it again real quick. Joint tenancy can be developed in the pit through possession, even interest, at the same time, and you're both on the title. Now, G-Sam, good old Sammy boy here, he's great at severing these joint tenancies. Woo-hoo! Now, how does good Sam get rid of the tenants? Oh, you're just all kinds of nosy, aren't you? But okay, I'll tell you. So good old Sam, he has them give it away during their life so they convey it. He might get them to sign a contract for sale. There might be an actual foreclosure or judicial sale by a judgment lien creditor. Or it might be used to execute a mortgage in a title theory state. Yeah, I know. You don't understand what those words mean right now. That's okay. I'm gonna get there. I'll drag you through all the little fancy words. Don't you worry one bit. Okay, maybe you should worry a little bit because, Sam can get a little rough. That's why we call him good old boy Sam. Yes. Now, the final tenancy is one you might be familiar with, because if your mom and pop own their home, their tenancy by the entirety, which occurs with marriage. Maybe I should marry Wilma. That might make this easier. Of course, we'd have to get rid of Fred and Bernie, because I don't think Wilma will come without Betty. So, tenancy by the entirety means that there is a right of survivorship, which there's also in joint tenancy, which doesn't require marriage. It just requires documentation. And you can't form a joint tenancy just by saying, oh, if I die, you get the title. No! No! So, if you need to defeat an entirety, so basically, your money-grubbing spouse, I've had a few of them. I've had quite a few of them. But that's neither here nor there. Now, you've heard of D's. You've heard of double D's. You've heard of triple D's. Don't worry, these are G's. they're not going to hurt you much. What you need to defeat a tenancy by the entirety is a quadruple D. So, I'm a little bit of overkill, but quadruple Ds, they'll get the job done. And the way a quadruple D works, you've got death of one spouse automatically vests title in the surviving spouse. Now, if one of the spouses becomes a debtor in bankruptcy, federal law allows the trustee in bankruptcy to sell. Now, the trustee in that matter will divide the proceeds, half to the trustee in bankruptcy and the other half to the non-bankrupt spouse. Then we have dual transfer of tenancy by the entirety, in which both husband and wife take part. So that means husband and wife, or husband and husband, or wife and wife, because we are not that dense. Both parties of the marriage transfer their tenancy by the entirety. Now, the last one, which I know some of you have gone through, just like me. Divorce, annulment, or if you're in the good old state of New York, a separation. I know, it's such a horrible word. I can barely get it out of my mouth. A separation judgment. So that gives you your quadruple D's for getting rid of a tenancy by the entirety. Again, that's death, a debtor, a dual transfer, or a divorce will get you right on out of that tenancy by the entirety. It's a good way to end it. So, you got this co-tenant. You own it together. What are your rights and liabilities of that co-ownership? Well, we're going to talk about some pads. And no, we ain't talking about that kind of pad. Get your mind out of gutter. We're also not talking about, the pad of living somewhere nice. No. We're talking about possession, accountability, duty of fair dealing, and to share contribution. Now, I know you're wondering, well, what does all that mean? Well, the first one's obvious. You're going to share possession. You're already doing that, aren't you? Now, sharing accountability, you're accountable to what happens on that property. Now, duty of fair dealing means you're not going to go behind your co-tenant's back and, try and sell the property or, let somebody own to steal all the oil. Or water, because sometimes water's better than oil. Sometimes water is better than oil. You also have to share the contribution. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means you have to share the operating expenses. And those are divided based on the ownership interests of each co-tenant. Now, these operating expenses consist of necessary charges. Do you need me to explain what necessary means? You're right. That's a dumb question. Necessary are things like taxes, the mortgage payments, and without those, there's no co-tenancy, so they're necessary. Now, rent payments received from a third party's possession of your co-property minus operating expenses are divided between the two of you based on your interests, your owner interests as a co-tenant. Meaning, if you own 60% and they own 30%, I don't know who owns the last 10%, don't ask me. Don't know, don't care. It means they only get 30% of whatever's left over. You get 60%. Because that's their ownership interest. Now, you're co-tenants, not joint tenants, so it doesn't have to be even. Repair costs. I know this is the part you all really want to hear, right? Can I split my repair costs? Can I split them? Can I split them, Kimmy? Can I split them? No. Even if they're necessary, they are not divided between co-tenants. Meaning there is no right to reimbursement. No right to reimbursement. Now, improvement costs are not divided between the co-tenants either. But, there's a but. And we love a good but. We do love a good but. The co-tenant who pays for the improvements, well, they can get credit for the repairs or whatever other improvement they've done in a partition action. And you're probably wondering, what the hell's a partition? Isn't that a part of a hard drive or something? No. Well, it is, but that's not what we're talking about. And I know you ain't that techie. I've seen your browsing history. Now, a partition is related to possession. And I'm not talking about getting possessed by good old Billy Bobby Ghost. Or Secret Goat. Either way, it's not important. We're not talking about that kind of possession. We're talking about possession of the property. Now, an ouster, that occurs when a co-tenant denies another co-tenant their rightful access to the property. Now, there has been something that can be done for that co-tenant that's just been, kicked off their property. Because they own part of it. And, no matter how much of something you own, you have a right to go on it. It's kind of the whole purpose. Well, the ousted tenant can get an injunction. Injunction, junction, what's your function? Yes, an injunction, which gives them access to the property. Now, they could also, there's more. We love more. We love more. Yes. They could also recover damages for the value of the use well ousted. Well, what does that mean? That means if while you were denied access to the property, and let's say it made $250,000, well, you could recover damages based on that $250,000 it made while you were denied. Now, what about that, partitions part we were talking about earlier? When we were talking about that again? Oh, yeah! When we were talking about them improvement costs. Silly me. So, a partition action is a remedy. And we love us a good remedy. Helps solve all the problems. Mm-hmm. A partition action is an equitable remedy that is available unilaterally to joint tenants. Meaning, just because one person has it doesn't mean the other doesn't. Doesn't mean like one person can say the other doesn't have this access. No. Now, there are two, count them with me, two types of partition actions. You have a partition in kind. Partition in kind. Which physically divides the property. Just, I don't know about you, but I know my dad growing up, he'd be like, oh, you don't want to share that toy, huh? How about I cut it in half, you can each get a half. That's a partition in kind. Now, courts will prefer this because it's a whole lot easier to separate a party and their property than try and force them to sell it. Because if you ever saw First Wives Club, you don't know. Well, she sold all of his assets for $1. And she owed him half. And she was generous. She gave him all of it. Gives you good ideas, doesn't it? Now, the other, which is a partition by sale, which we mentioned, that involves selling the property and dividing the proceeds from the sale among each co-tenant. And that's based on their ownership interests in the property. Now, courts will only do this if it's not practical and it's not fair to all parties to try and do a partition in kind. So, like, you know, we'll do personal property for this example. Which personal property is anything that is not land. Anything that's movable, isn't a structure on land, or isn't land itself, is personal property. Because it's your own personal business. So get out of mine. I see you staring at my personal property. Alright, back to the topic at hand. Say you have a car. It's not practical to do a partition in kind. It's just not. You can't split the car in half. Be interesting if it still worked. But you can't split it in half. It's not going to happen. You can't split a car in half. So, they would force you to sell it and then split the proceeds.